it's very, very easy to go viral on social still now as it was a few years ago. The easiest way I can say, because I know a lot of people listening are probably like, okay, I've got the build your brand piece down. I've got the sales piece down. How do I get the new followers? And I guarantee you, I don't like give a lot of guarantees, but I guarantee you do this for 100 days, you've gone viral.
Welcome. I'm Alyssa Nobriga, your host of the Healing and Human Potential podcast, a place for you to discover the multidimensionality of what it means to be human. Over the past 20 years, I've trained thousands of coaches in my methodology, leveraging my experience as a former psychotherapist, and I'm here to share with you all the wisdom and insights that I've learned along the way. Each week, I'll share with you life-changing tools to support you in awakening and manifesting your dream life from the inside out. We'll be exploring the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, really diving deep into the art of human potential through the lens of psychology, spirituality, and coaching. Let's let the magic unfold. One of my goals with this podcast is to introduce you to people who are living their magic so they can more fully help you access your own. And I'm really excited to be sitting down with today's guest. She's built one of the largest online platforms and communities to support female entrepreneurs in their growth, but also just happens to be one of the closest friends in my life. I love her so much. Today's guest is none other than Natalie Ellis, CEO and founder of Boss Babe. So Natalie is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to starting and scaling online businesses and communities, but she's also an expert in growing an online social media presence and a systems queen. And so we dive into the real conversation here, sharing the behind the scenes about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, her learnings and lessons, as well as tips to navigate your journey with more grace. She's literally giving away all her secrets today in this episode. Natalie, so happy that you were here in person.
So happy.
I want to share because I know you have one of the largest online female entrepreneurial communities. So you get a lot of the back end of what women really struggle with. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about what you think the biggest challenges are that women face. I know just from my work, some of the inner blocks that the women face are perfectionism, people pleasing, self-doubt, procrastination, kind of surface level blocks, and it kind of roots back to self-worth. I would say a lot of it, but I would love to hear your perspective around what holds women back the most in entrepreneurship.
I think everything that you've just listed, and even when we're talking about the back end of business, when we get into the logistics, the systems, the funnel, I think it all stems from all the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, one of the biggest things I see in entrepreneurs that are really spinning their wheels in the beginning is they just constantly doubt themselves and they procrastinate and they start blaming themselves for procrastinating. And the more they blame themselves, the worse that it gets. And they just feel like they're making no progress. And they also will often jump from thing to thing to thing. They'll launch something, it doesn't go well, so they'll launch something else. And they won't give themselves enough time to really refine and let something work. And I do think a lot of that comes from the inner work.
Yes.
Because I know just myself, when you're in those early stages of business and it feels like nothing is working, it is so hard to keep going. And I think you have to have such solid self-belief or just
really good tools.
a belief that this is going to work out for you. If you are resourceful enough, I think that's the number one thing. If you're resourceful enough, you will be able to make it work, but you have to have that belief. Otherwise you will procrastinate. You'll sabotage yourself. You'll keep bouncing from thing to thing to thing and avoid the actual work that's going to move you forward, which is often sticking with it when it's not working, refining, you know, leaning into the things that feel really uncomfortable because they're not necessarily second nature to you.
Yeah.
So yes, everything you've said, I see that manifest in all of the logical, practical stuff.
I know. I kept thinking, or most people, even when I was hiring team, I kept being like, no, this is an outer thing. And I kept getting it was an inner thing. And as I was willing to let myself receive, then it was like, our business is a reflection of our inner world. So I love that you see that because you are such a badass and you get the balance of both inner and outer. And I know, you know, a big one, like you're saying for entrepreneurs is if it doesn't click for them, then they jump onto the next thing and then they spread themselves too thin and don't get to discover what they're really capable of. And I remember when you and I co-led a mastermind, one of the gifts that you shared with me just by being in your presence, I remember you were like, we were in a launch and you were like, we're killing it. And I'm like, wait, we are? And I got to see your mindset. You were further along in business, and I got to see your mindset of like, this is an opportunity and how do we get resourceful? And I was like, okay, I get to choose how I hold this. And I loved that. And I still come back to that. I'm like, I'm killing it because if I see it as a dread, or if I see that I'm not doing well, I'm not going to be as motivated. And so it's like knowing that we can utilize that muscle to have that choice point is so invaluable. And I wonder if you have because I know that as we continue growing with entrepreneurship, there are going to be other challenges that come up, and you've had to restructure your company this year, your offerings. I don't know if there's a story that you're open to sharing around like a hardship that you went through and having to push through, or trying to figure it out until it clicked, and how you grew as a result. But I think that might be helpful to hear.
How long do you have? Because there's always so many. Yeah, I mean, I would say last year was probably my hardest year ever in business. Buying out my co-founder, who I'd always done business with, was terrifying on so many levels. You know, I had this story that so many people would like leave my membership because it was no longer the two of us, and that's why they joined. So there was that, you know, in fear of, are my team all going to leave and walk away because we're making these big restructures? So there was a lot of fear and mindset work that I had to do. Then on a practical level, you know, because when you're dealing with that kind of decision making in a business, it's very hard to pour into your business.
Yeah.
And the business really wasn't in a great place. And so when I ended up fully taking it over, I was taking a look at more things that weren't working than were. And I remember even having that conversation with you and saying, you know, Alyssa, for the first time ever in business, I'm finding it really hard and I'm scared. Yeah. Because normally I had, in the past, I'd been the kind of person that was like, we're killing it, we're crushing it. And, you know, and when I already wasn't in the best mental place. And so then to be dealing with a business that felt like it was just losing money left, right, and center, I was like turning the Titanic. There were so many offers that didn't feel aligned with me anymore, that I wanted to refine, a lot of content that I needed to refilm because the business was changing so much. It was just a really, really challenging time. And it was also one of those things that a quick overnight fix wasn't going to work for. You know, let's say you're generally having a bad quarter, you could do a launch and get back on track, right? This wasn't necessarily that situation, because I would have been relaunching something that didn't feel aligned with me. And then I'd be back to square one, because I'd still have to build a brand new offer suite. I'd still have to fix a lot of the kind of holes in the back end of the business. And so it really was one of those times where I had to say, I need to fully slow down, and I need to be okay with being in fear, and I need to be okay that the business isn't doing well. I need to be okay that we're not growing, and take the time it's going to take to restructure and turn this business into something that I feel really aligned with. I feel really comfortable and happy sharing about. And it's just an uncomfortable place to be, you know, as a business owner, to restructure, to let people go, to be okay not growing, to be nervous about your bottom line. It's not a nice place to be when people's livelihoods are dependent on you. And all throughout it, I would say it was just mindset work. It was surrender. It was trusting that I knew where I was going, even if I didn't have the answers. It was being rock solid in my own confidence and leadership, because a lot of the team wanted answers that didn't exist yet. And I had to be okay telling them that, and also telling them, you know, you're either in this or you're out of this, and have a lot of those really challenging conversations. But all throughout it, I just had this deep feeling that if I do what feels really aligned, and I put the work in, but I also do the inner work that it takes, I will get out the other side of it. And I did, and it took a lot less time than I thought. But something that you often say is like, when you go to the root of something, it's actually faster to work through it. I believe the exact same thing is true in business, right? If I avoid and I just keep doing the things that feel good, and I do the launches and I keep putting the band-aids on and avoid the core issues, it will persist, and it'll probably get bigger and harder to deal with. If I go straight to the core of that issue in the business and I deal with it head on, I can start making changes faster. So it wasn't a fun time. I mean, maybe there's a sadistic part of me that's like, it was kind of fun because it was kind of nice to like fail and experience a lot of those challenges and be able to pull it back, and like on the other side of it, be like, fuck yeah, I did that. That feels kind of good. But
I think it's a healthy challenge. What I hear is like, you're willing to take on a healthy challenge and discover what your resourcefulness is, what you're capable of as a result. And I think that's one of the things of why you're a successful entrepreneur, because you are willing to be courageous. You are willing to get uncomfortable and feel a sensation of failure. And as you actually breathe into that sensation of failure, it opens you to freedom. It actually dissolves in your nervous system. And then you get more strategic, your mind's clear, you make bolder moves. Another thing that I see you do is, and I study people like you and Danette and other people where I'm like, how do you move through the world? What is your mindset? One of the things I notice is you make quick decisions. And I noticed that with really successful entrepreneurs, they make quick decisions. There's less getting caught up in the narrative of self-doubt. And it's interesting, as I've gotten more successful, I don't get caught up in the self-doubt anymore. It's like I can be compassionate with that mindset, but I don't feed it the way that I used to and loop in it. Because I think if we loop in it, then we have all these open tabs. We don't actually complete things. We've got kids and all these other life things that get piled on top. And then people are like, where's my life? Like, where's my free time? And so like you're saying, the head on, being willing to get uncomfortable, to feel the quote unquote failure or the uncomfortable thing, moves through our body, opens our mind, we make bolder decisions. So all these things I just want to highlight for people to be like, how can I lean into that 5% more today?
Yeah. And on the quick decisions, I really don't buy into the idea that there's always a right decision. And I think that helps me make faster decisions, because if I am not bought into the belief that there's a right decision, then, I have 5 decisions I could make that will push me in the right direction. And so I'm never attached to like, it has to be the right decision. It has to be the one. I'm like, does this feel good? Does that sound right? Okay, let's move forward with that so we can actually move forward. And there's probably, 5 other decisions that would have also worked out, but at least I've chose one. I've made a decision. The team's unblocked. I'm unblocked. We can make progress. And I think that's the right decision, is the progress piece.
That's great. I love that mindset. Even as you're talking, I'm hearing about relationships where it's like, there's not the right one in my eyes. You just follow what your truth is, and whoever you're going to project your stuff onto any one of those partners. So same material, who are you choosing to do the work with? So there are a lot of, and I really like the parallel between the balance and the connections between business and love. And so as you're talking, it's like, we get better at business, we get better at love, we get better at love, and just navigating our own inner experience. So all of that's fun for me to hear and make some of those associations. So some of those like grounded tips for people navigating transition, you would say, just to kind of give some nuggets, like as they're navigating transition, I guess be willing to be uncomfortable, do the inner work.
Yeah, get willing to be uncomfortable and really just take a full holistic approach at what you're dealing with. I think that's really, really important. Let's say your business is struggling financially. Some people might have a tendency to avoid it because they don't want to look at just how bad things are. And they think that if they just focus on revenue generation, it will fix itself. And actually, I remember taking a look at the P&L, and it was so clear to me why certain things weren't profitable. And it was not about making more money, but it was about cutting certain costs.
Yes.
So really be willing to look at what you're dealing with. And I think you'll surprise yourself at the solutions that come to you. And, don't be afraid to make those bolder decisions that, you might question in 6 months, will I regret this? Right now, if that's the right decision for you and it's going to be the thing that helps you move forward, be willing to make it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the season that I was in. I'm like, okay, I'm in a season where maybe I'm only thinking 3 months ahead right now, and I'm going to make the decision that works for me in this 3 months. And if in 6 months I think, I wish that person was still on my team, great, a lesson learned. But in that season, you need to make the decisions that are going to serve you, especially if you're in a transition that's moving very fast. Yeah. If you're in a business that's moving without you and is going to continue in one way or the other without your decision making, let's get it on the right path, make the calls that feel really uncomfortable, and you will make progress.
Yeah, kind of like make the best decision for right now.
Yeah.
You're going to learn from it, giving yourself grace. Yeah. And I also think it's helpful just to have a community of people because it normalizes it. I remember when I was first going through a lot of growth, you were like, this is just a stage. I'm like, okay. So it's like, it helped me. And also my girlfriend Layla was like, oh, that's a Tuesday. I thought something was blowing up. I'm like, oh, what? She's like, that's Tuesday. I'm like, okay. So just holding it differently to be able to like kind of stretch the capacity to be with the range of our human experience through entrepreneurial growth, like learning curve or growth pains. So I love that. And I imagine that you have completely transformed the way you think about business, being a mama now. Noemi's what, like 2?
Coming up on 2. Oh my God.
And so I'm curious how you hold business now being a mom and like what's shifted for you as a result.
Everything has shifted for me. Before I became a mum, I would definitely say so much of my identity was wrapped up in achievement. That's the way it always been. And it was so wrapped up in achievement. And I really told myself the story that, it wasn't, and I was okay without achievement, but I was addicted to my work.
Yeah.
I was addicted to what's my next goal. And when I became a mother, I went through a really challenging postpartum period. And during that period, I questioned everything about my identity. I felt like I didn't even know who I was anymore. And slowly I started unraveling all of these layers that I'd put on out of probably, childhood and growing up a certain way. I'd put on these layers and I was playing these characters that maybe never was who I actually truly was. And I feel like motherhood's been the most beautiful homecoming to my true identity. Like I don't feel like motherhood changed me. I feel like motherhood brought me back to who I always was.
Wow.
The person I was born as, that I like covered in all of these layers out of, wanting to please and wanting to achieve and all of these things, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved. I just put all these layers on, and motherhood was this full homecoming back to myself. And it's really beautiful to build a business from that place because I feel so unattached. I'm so happy. Like truly, there is nothing that makes me happier than being at home with my husband and my baby. Nothing can make me happier. And so business is a bonus. Everything I do on top of that is a bonus, but I'll never ever compromise that, what makes me truly happy, for anything else. And so I'm so unwilling to do the things I might have said yes to in business before if it's going to compromise. I'm not like really attached to these goals like I previously was. If we don't hit the goal, okay, moving on.
Because your work's not attached to it.
It's not attached to it. I'm just happy. I'm deeply happy and fulfilled by being a mother. And I love to claim that. I think in society, the content I've seen lately is a lot of women feeling ashamed to say that, to say that motherhood is the thing that deeply fulfills them the most. And I'm so not ashamed to say that. It truly is. And my work's just a bonus on top of that, but it's not the thing that fulfills me.
That's beautiful. And I remember when you were going through that phase, like your courage and willingness to really go to the depth of that, of who am I outside of work? And that really, I had so much more respect for you for the willingness to do that. And I really feel a maturity happening within you, becoming a mother, really stepping into yourself more fully. But I never heard you say it that way. And I think you claiming that gives other women permission if that's their truth, or other parents permission if that's their truth. And that's really beautiful. Yeah,
there's something to be said about just claiming whatever your truth is.
Yeah.
Society puts so much pressure on us, especially as women as well. And we often end up claiming truths that actually aren't true.
Yeah.
And so just getting to the root of like, what truly fulfills you? Why do you feel like you're here? What is your purpose? And it might change every decade. It might change every year, but being honest with yourself about what that is, I think is really important, because if you then prioritize what matters to you, life just feels good. I mean, you know this, you're such an example of this. Life just feels good and it gets better and better and better.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about us, like I'm on the other side of the spectrum where I'm really clear. I wasn't called to have kids, and I feel so grateful for that. And I've got amazing stepkids, and I love to be this bonus mom that plays and enhances their life and be enhanced by their life without the same kind of relationship that a mother would have, right? And in the traditional sense. And so whatever our truth is, I love the permission for that. And 100% it can change.
And I love that you knew that and followed that too, because I also do feel like there is pressure on women to have kids. And maybe they felt like that wasn't their path, but maybe they went down that path because they felt they had to, or they couldn't be honest about it. And I just think there's something so beautiful about just knowing what's meant for you and following it no matter what anyone else says.
Totally. Imagine having a fulfilling career doing what you love, working from anywhere in the world, setting your own hours while making good money and a big impact. If that lights you up, then I'm super excited to share with you today's sponsor, the Institute for Coaching Mastery. This is my robust, accredited year-long certification program for newer seasoned coaches, therapists, leaders, and those just looking to up-level their life in a profound way. We have an amazing community of students from all around the world who have really started their journey to expand with us both personally and professionally. And this experience is designed to give you the 3 things that you need to thrive. So first, you have all of the tools and support you need to move past what's been holding you back so that you can completely change the trajectory of your life. And then you learn how to masterfully and confidently facilitate transformation with your clients or your team, regardless of your niche. If you want to do health, business, relationship, or you just have no idea yet, we hold your hand through that. And then lastly, you'll receive my 6-figure and beyond signature roadmap that's customizable to meet you wherever you are. So whether you want to do high ticket sales, online marketing, or you just want to hit 6 figures without ever needing to go on social media, we've got you covered. And this truly is the most rewarding work in the world. We have new students now who have a wait list of dream clients in under a year. We also have seasoned students who are doing $80,000 months. And this is really about creating lasting transformation from the inside out so that you can share your gifts and serve the world in all the ways that you're called to. And I've seen firsthand the power of what happens when you have the community to collaborate with, but you also have the right tools and resources to really thrive. And so whether you want to do your own personal development, you're wanting to become a coach, or you're just looking for a cutting-edge approach to really grow your business, the Institute for Coaching Mastery is for you. You are held every single step of the way. And so if you want to get behind-the-scenes access to the Institute with 3 proven transformational tools for free to help you create the business and life you love, all you have to do is go to alyssanobriga.com/tools, or you can find us at alyssanobriga.com/apply now to see all the details and apply today. And one of the things I learned from you just by being your friend and being an example, and I watch the way you live, is the clarity with your boundaries and your truth. Like, you literally know what is a yes and a no. You honor that in a way that I'm like taking notes and I'm watching you. I'm like, wow. And I think that probably supports you with, you could say, work-life balance. We know there's not balance. It's never a static thing, but it's more of like integration. But I'm curious to see or to hear your psychology around how you hold your boundaries and how you prioritize your truth, especially when there are always going to be people trying to pull you away from that, so that you really do your part and let other people either on the team or in your world honor their role in the agreement. And I'm only asking for a friend, not me at all.
For a friend. Yeah, it's so important to me to have boundaries. I will say it's a lot easier to have boundaries in your life when you are surrounded by people that do the work. When you're surrounded by people that don't take everything personally. Yeah. Because if you are surrounded by people that take everything personally, I know it is harder to have boundaries. And that requires you to do a whole nother level of work so that you don't take on their stuff. Yeah. And you often, because I've been in this situation too, you often then have to take on the projection of someone else that you're a bad person because you didn't go along with what they wanted. So I will say that is like the life hack is get around people that like are consciously doing the work. That really, really helps. And getting really clear on what your boundary is and make sure you're setting it out of a proactive, not a reactive place. So I have made the mistake in the past where I've gotten so overwhelmed that I've made a boundary out of that place. Oh yeah. And it's never, the best way to make a boundary. And I think it just doesn't work for yourself or for anyone else involved. So getting really clear on what that is for you and proactively thinking about them. And then, there's a boundary doesn't have to be like, no. Yeah. Like, yeah, no is a full sentence if that's the way you want to make a boundary, but you can also make a boundary in a way that feels really good to you. If you don't want to go to a certain event and it's going to upset your friend by not going, you don't necessarily need to say, well, that's their problem. They can go deal with that. Yeah. Just be really heart open and have that honest conversation with them about why it might be a no. And I think you'd be really surprised at how many people are like really open to celebrating a no or accepting it and letting you do you. I just recently had this with a friend and I knew that they would be upset when I said no to a certain thing. And I still needed to say no. Yeah. And so I just thought about, okay, knowing them and how they receive feedback and love, what is a way that I could adapt and set a boundary? And I think that's a bit of growth that I've had to do myself, because previously I would have just been like a no as a full sentence kind of person. Yeah. And now I'm like, no. Yeah. There is other ways to set boundaries.
I love that. I love, well, just speaking, I know a lot of 2s in the Enneagrams, the helpers can pendulum swing to the 8 where it's like, no harsh. So bless all those 2s that have been overextending and then they learn the harsh boundary. That's okay. That's part of the learning.
Yeah.
That's a process of it. But I love that you say that you can find a softer way to speak your truth while still honoring theirs. And I think it's easier to, as you're talking, establish a boundary up front with somebody, then reestablish those boundaries. So it's like being graceful with ourselves and maybe even being transparent. Like, this is hard for me to say no, but I love you enough to set us up in our relationship for the long term. Can you help me with this? Or this is what I'm experiencing. I'm not sure how to navigate this, but this is my truth. And I want to make sure that I'm heard and you're heard. It's still, but what I'm hearing you say is also like the courage, the willingness to speak it, even if it's uncomfortable, and to let them know that they have all their inner resources to navigate your truth and that that's not your responsibility, or maybe even to be there for the part of, I'm talking to myself, for me to be there for the part of me that cares that they're going to be hurt while still insourcing my care to that place rather than trying to get them to be okay so that then I'm okay, like kind of cutting out the middleman. I'm just coaching myself through as you're talking. I'm like, okay, that's another way to approach it.
Yeah. I really, really like that. And I think courage is definitely the way to do it. And it's so nice to show up in a conversation. Sometimes it makes it a lot easier if you can say, this is really hard for me and it's also important to me. So I'm just going to say it and then let's talk about it. And I do think people receive it in a different way too.
Because even as your friend, I always want to know your truth.
Right.
Even if it's hard for me to hear, I want a relationship based on truth.
Well, you've done the work. Not everyone feels that way.
Right. Yeah. And then when we're honest though, then we meet, and it may be something that I'm like, that is hard to hear, but I respect it, because I would want you to really hear my truth as well. And I actually feel more comfortable setting a boundary with you because you have clean boundaries, and then you would easily respect mine. But yeah, it would be harder for me to set a boundary with somebody that I didn't feel like has honored their own boundaries, right? And boundaries is a thing for me based on my upbringing, which I'm going to go into it with my Mother's Day podcast with my mom.
Oh my goodness.
We're going to go
amazing.
deep.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to share because there's a lot of mother-daughter dynamics that we've been able to play out that I think can be gems for people. So, and I know that that's the core of my boundary stuff. And I have actually randomly have really good boundaries. It's just that I'll overcompensate sometimes. And so I'm curious to hear maybe about this, because I think competent women know that they can go above and beyond, that they can do it. I actually think it's really helpful to have the resiliency to know that you are capable and resourceful, and primarily getting to 6 figures. That's a really good skill to have, to be able to wear different hats, jump in and like be the social person, be the whatever for a smaller business. And then there's a point where you're moving into 7 figures that actually holds you back, where you actually need to learn to delegate. It's the who, not the how, like starting to stay more leadership visionary. And that was a big leap for me. Do you have any insights around your journey around that? Or has that been easy for you to kind of still stay in your lane with team and those boundaries as you've scaled?
No, that's really not been easy for me at all. That's been really challenging. I read a book about this, not about this, but it goes into a lot about this. It's called Rocket Fuel. It's great. And it's about the visionary integrator relationship. And what they say in that book actually, I think, really normalizes that an entrepreneur, a visionary, typically is the person that jumps in and meddles with everything.
Yeah.
They know they can wear so many hats, and they often know they can do it better than someone else because they've done it for longer and they understand the business intimately, and it's so easy for them to jump in and meddle. So definitely having that self-awareness of like, okay, maybe it's in my nature that I'm a bit of a meddler. So I have to really create practices to stop myself doing it.
Okay, so in this book, is it not that we're kind of born as that type? We can nurture those types of ways of being the implementer versus the visionary?
Yeah, like there's a way of being in that relationship. And actually, if we are naturally born as visionaries, that they say the visionary is, the person that runs the company, has the idea for the company, is responsible for the vision of the company. Most visionaries have the tendency to jump in and want to do things, to micromanage, to meddle, to, if something's not going well, they want to jump in and fix it because they know they can, and they care deeply about the result. Of course, it's your business. And so it's about the practice. For me, reading it, it was like, okay, great, I'm not crazy. And what practices can I put in place knowing me? And so I think about the times that I would typically want to meddle or throw like a spanner in the works. And it might be my team's good. They've got the vision, they've got the goals. And then I go in the shower, I have the best shower idea ever. I come out, I want to like tell the whole team. And then I know that's going to pull everybody off track. So where can I go put that idea so that I'm comfortable that the idea is not going to go to die and I'm going to resurface it at some point, but not everyone on the team needs to know about the idea. So I have an ideas board and I go put the idea there. So it's little things like that. I think about where might I have a tendency to jump in, or let's say with social media, right? Because I did social media up until for our business till we were a multi-7-figure business. And I didn't want to give it up because it was the thing I was really, really good at. And I knew drove so many results for us. And when I found someone that I felt really comfortable handing it off to, that I felt like, you know what, you get social media way more than I do. I had an honest conversation with her about, hey, I do have a tendency to jump in on these things. Where I think I can be best utilized is when we're doing sales content. I really want you to lean on me. But then in the other realms of content, I actually think you're better at this than I am. So I'm going to let you run with it. And if I come to you with an idea or pushback, take it as optional and still run with what you want to do. Okay. So it kind of opens up that dialogue for me to say, I do want to be involved. Now we'll come to you with feedback. And I often might get nervous that, oh, that piece of content feels edgy, or it's, you know, I wouldn't have posted that. I might get nervous and I'm coming to you, talking to you about that. Doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. That's and beautiful. It doesn't mean you need to pivot your process, but just being proactive about it. Because I also don't want to feel like, oh, just because I hire a social media person means I need to fully step away from that in the brand when it's such a big part of the brand. So just managing it like that and having the self-awareness and then opening up that conversation with my team.
I love that, because that empowers then your team to know that they're really in their own domain, that you trust them, and that you have this tendency because of your self-awareness and your communication that you may try to meddle in it. And really that's just optional unless it's sales. I love that, because then it gives them perspective, it gives them empowerment. And I'm just thinking about myself because I've just hired this CEO and she's like, bring things to me, not everybody else. I'm like, okay, so it's a mindset shift. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to you and you're going to distribute to the team.
And it sometimes feels inefficient.
Yes, it does. It does. And yet if I'm meddling in everybody else's thing, they're not going to think that I trust them, when really it's just because I want to help. But that's my tendency from the past, when it's way better to empower them and then get out of the weeds so that they feel like they can find their own resourcefulness with the work and trial and error.
And I do something similar with my integrator. So often I'll see something in the company that I might want to respond to, but instead of responding to it, I'll respond it to her and she'll respond to it. That's good. And I think it also then teaches people they can go to somebody else. They don't always need to come to you. You're not the one always looking at things and overseeing it.
I don't want to be.
Listen, like we're always going to have opinions, but having a buffer is really nice.
Yeah, I've only had my CEOs since November 1st, so it's just a few months. But now I'm at the place where I'm really getting out of the weeds and having a system of, kind of directors or managers above that they can go to. I'm just sort of starting to establish that. So those external boundaries are going to be that reflection of the internal boundaries, knowing that I can be with the part of me that wants to jump in and then recondition those habits and really trust them to rise, which is ultimately what's going to make the company better.
Yeah. And I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was, but they said, you really should be the quietest person in your meeting. And I was like, thanks for that feedback. It's like, you should be the quietest person in the meeting. If there's a team meeting, you should be the quietest. And it taught me a lesson about, because there's certain times I would want to jump in and give an answer. And actually by sitting back, maybe that's not the first answer that my team got to, but it's the answer they landed on. And seeing it play out, it's just been really, really interesting and a learning lesson. Because when you're building a company, you're used to being the one leading and answering.
It's a different stage.
It's so different.
Yeah. It's a different stage, requires different skills, different muscles. And what I'm hearing is once it's established, I love that, because I actually have been able to witness you in a meeting and your team does come up with solutions and then they're nurtured to come up with ideas. So it's not always coming from you. I think that's beautiful. I'm taking notes. You brought up social media, and I can't have you on the podcast without talking about social media. I know there are some people that are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to grow an audience. I know you were an expert at this. And I also think there are some people that are like, is it too late? What do I do? Any tips or hacks that you can share with people around social growth?
So you're not too late. I actually was just putting together a training on this, and I really wanted to go and find evidence to prove that you're not too late, because I know it's a story that a lot of people have, and we often need to see evidence before we believe it.
Yeah.
I recently helped a client go from 0 followers to 500,000 in 3 months.
No.
Yeah. 3 months. And that was very recent. That was just a few months ago. So it's not too late. And I just love to share that, because often you're like, okay, prove it. So there's the proof. So no, it's absolutely not too late. And so the way that I talk about approaching social media is that there are only 3 types of content. And we often get really overwhelmed thinking, what do I post? Well, here's your menu. There's 3 different types. There's content to build your brand, there's content to build your audience, and there's content to sell. That's it. And you really want to think about, what is my intention with my social media account? And based on that and based on my goals, I'm going to post content that will reflect my goals. And so if your goal is to grow a following, you really probably want to be 75% creating content that builds your audience and 25% content that builds your brand, so that you're bringing in new people and the new people stay. So that's the way I think about it. It's just a simple equation. So if you're wanting to build an audience, the best way to grow is viral style content. There is no better type of content than viral style. And an example of content that builds your brand is content that gives a lot of value. Content that brings people into your world, gives them something for being there, and helps them to remember why they're there. Because there is a lot of noise on social media, and if you're popping up in stories and someone's like, wait, who is this person? They're going to unfollow you. Or you're popping up in feed, what are they talking about? They're going to unfollow. Whereas if you've done the work to really introduce yourself and bring value, they're going to remember you for something. And so you're not on that follower roller coaster, which I know a lot of people are. I gained 10 followers and I lost 20 and they stay on that. I do think when you have a somewhat established social presence, you're in like 1,000 to 2,000 followers, that's established. It's a lot of people. Then you want to be thinking about your mix. Okay, maybe 50% of your content is to grow your audience, 40% is to build your brand, and 10% is to convert, and really getting the mix that's right for you. Because if you're 90% selling and 10% growing, you're losing everybody and probably nobody's buying. You're just burning them out. You're churning and burning. So just thinking about it like that, it's actually easy when you think about it like that, and take a lot of the complexity out of it. You know, you don't need to be dancing or lip syncing to have viral content. It's very, very easy to go viral on social still now, as it was a few years ago. The easiest way I can say, because I know a lot of people listening are probably like, okay, I've got the build your brand piece down, I've got the sales piece down, how do I get the new followers? The easiest way, and this is a very, very simple formula, is go and find 10 people who have very similar audiences to the audience you want to attract. 10 people. And then go and find their 10 most viral pieces of content, put it all together. I like it. Listen, I like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, you do. I know you do.
Put it all together in a spreadsheet. That's 100 pieces of content you can take inspiration from. And just every day, go and pick one of those pieces of content and think about, could I repost this? Could I repurpose this? Could I take a lesson from this? Like analyze it. What was the hook? What was the audio? What about it made it go viral? And I guarantee you, I don't like give a lot of guarantees, but I guarantee you do this for 100 days, you've gone viral.
Wow.
It's just a formula. It's not this mystical thing. It's not guesswork. It's just a straight formula, but you have to be willing to do it for that time and not give up.
Yeah. And are there any apps or programs that help kind of synthesize any of the data that support us in this? Or it's really more somebody in there every day figuring it out?
Figuring it out.
Okay.
I don't think there's a replacement for that, honestly. Because what you're doing when you're going and finding those 10 people is you're having to really understand who your audience is. That's the first step. Because a lot of people think they know, and then I'm like, okay, name 10 people that you have a similar audience to, and they can't. And they say, well, no one's like me. Well, that's not true. So that is a good step in of itself to go and find those people. Like we all have overlapping audiences, no matter how unique we are, we all have overlapping audiences. And then second to that, when I say go find that 10 most viral piece of content, you have to know what you're looking for. So you go onto the Reels page and you're scrolling. And as you're scrolling, that is a masterclass in itself because this person's successful, so they're doing something right. So if you're spending time going through their page, that is a full masterclass in itself. It's not the end result that's necessarily the thing that you're learning from, but it's the whole process. And so I feel like if we skip the process, we skip the lesson.
Okay. So good. I love it. It's so grounded and practical.
It's practical. It's
good.
easy. It's just
good.
not, you know, a quick fix.
Yeah.
But it's easy.
But at least there's a science to it that then we can all apply. And I know you are like systems queens, spreadsheets for you and Steven, your husband, literally. I love you guys so much and have a spreadsheet for your packing list. Like you guys get each other on that level and I love it so much. And so what kind of systems can we utilize in our businesses and lives to help automate or make things easy? Anything else that you can offer for people, entrepreneurs specifically?
Oh my goodness.
You're like, you have a playbook for everything.
I could talk systems all day long. Okay, where to begin?
Or just like top few that would be valuable to systematize in business.
Okay, well, definitely you want to have a company wiki. A company wiki is, do you remember the intranet? Do you remember back in the day? You don't know what the intranet is?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. So like if you used to work for a company like way back when, you had this thing called a company intranet.
Okay.
Where you would log on and like, let's say you worked at Google. I don't know if Google ever had I did my internship at a law firm, right? So we had this intranet where you would log on and it would have like what you're focused on, what the goals of the company is. You could find all of the important files that you needed. You could go and find every person that worked at the company. Like every detail you needed about the company was on the intranet, right? I don't that's like showing our age, but that was a thing. And so you really need to replicate that in your business. And it's normally called a company wiki, and you can do it in Notion or any project management software.
Like a handbook.
It's just, a destination that has all the information that a team member might need.
Okay.
Where are all of your folders stored, and what's your naming convention with your folders? Who works at the company and what do they do? What is everybody responsible for on a daily basis? What do people do? What's their rhythm? How does the company run on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis?
Or if you don't have employees, what are their hours?
Totally. Just all of the details of the company you put into a wiki. I think that's the first place that everyone should start. And even if you have no employees, trust me, you'll be so grateful you're doing this now, because
I've had to clean up and even Google Docs, like people creating that and then taking off. And then I'm like, wait, how did we name it? How did we organize it? And then I didn't think systems were sexy. And now I'm like, I wished I had organized things a lot and like done this before I thought I needed it, because we've had to spend years cleaning some of this up. So I'm so happy that you're sharing this with people.
It's something that compounds. So it might take you longer now. It's going to save you time in the future. I have a graph that I often show people. Like I love to give people proofs. I'm like, you don't believe me. You think systems are a waste of time. I'm going to show you this graph. You're going to be in a time deficit for a while when you're implementing the system. Then you're going to hit a point where you're actually collapsing time because you're saving so much time. And it's so worth doing. So that is really important. And then, this might sound like a basic tip, but having a project management software like Asana or ClickUp, I don't care what it is, but having one where you assign tasks to someone, they assign tasks to you, and you can see what's on people's plates.
And really using that as the software, because we've also gotten a bad habit on my team years ago of using Slack as the even though we had ClickUp.
Can you do this?
Yeah.
Can you get this
It's
done?
like, okay, Slack is only for quick conversational things, but really just use the software, the project management software, so that it keeps things clear.
Yes.
And not having things in all the different places, not in Google, not in ClickUp, not in Slack. It's just one place of one source of truth.
One place.
Yeah.
And you would put everything in your company wiki, and it would be, here's where we manage tasks. Asana. Here's how we communicate. Slack. Here's how we, you can even go to the detail of, we use email for this, we would use Slack for this, we would use Asana for this, and just like laying it all out there. Even if you're writing the playbook for you, yourself, and you, like writing it down, and it might seem silly, but like you said, you're going to look back and think, thank goodness I did that, because it's making my life so much easier.
And one of the most common first hires is somebody for inbox, somebody for customer service. And I remember one time you said to automate that so that you could literally have an online course for your customer service person in case they can almost like onboard themselves into some degree by having this course that they take to understand where everything is. Yeah,
like for companies that like ours, that are educational companies, we pour so much into our clients. Why not pour that into our team?
Yeah.
You spend all this time creating amazing courses for clients. What if you create an amazing course for your team that tells them about who you are, why you exist, the stories that they might want to hear, anything that's relevant for the business, putting it into one place. Again, it's going to take time on the front end.
Yeah.
It's going to compound.
Yeah.
At one point, something's going to click where now you're not onboarding someone one by one and you're having to re-explain the same thing for the 10th time.
Yeah.
But you do it once and you probably put your best foot forward. You like explain it in a succinct way and you're like, yeah, that sounds really good. And you put them through that program.
And they're like, wait, what? And so, yeah, automate it and record everything. And this comes back to, I think what your core message is around freedom.
Yes.
Because when you have systems, then you have freedom. Talk to us about freedom, because I know you have such a passion to support entrepreneurs and women specifically in having more freedom in their life.
Yeah, my biggest core value is freedom. And I really, really think so many of us get into business for freedom and we lose that along the way. Because if you're not careful, your business can end up running you.
Yeah.
And I've been in that situation. When I talk about what I went through last year, I was in that situation and I built something that I didn't enjoy running because it was essentially running me. And so I really care about helping women build freedom-based businesses. And this is probably not the methodology you want to follow if you're raising venture capital and you're going down that path. But if you want to build a business that allows you to prioritize what matters to you in your life, these things do matter. You know, having funnels, having systems, having the ability to delegate. It is a skill that doesn't come natural to most entrepreneurs. How can we learn it? There are these core skills and core systems that we get to put in place in our business that is going to set you free.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw one of your posts, I think it was today, it was talking about, do you have time to spend with your family? Is that really freedom if you're running a business, but you don't have any time for your family or you don't have time for your own self-care? And I think there is a phase of growth. Like I could not have the business that I have without really going all in for a period of time. I could, in hindsight, if I had learned to delegate sooner, if I had had some systems, sure. And I think this is the beauty of having friends that are in entrepreneurship with you, or being in masterminds or communities where you can teach each other, you can show each other by being an example. And we are all just have our learning curves, but just all in service to having the freedom to live the life that is true for us, the freedom that we want to be living. So I love that you're a stand for that.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I wouldn't have the business I have either without going through that hustle phase. And I think you just get to be really intentional when you're in that phase of, okay, do I really want to grow at this rate in this season? Or do I want to grow a lot slower? And maybe I'll work for someone else while I'm doing it. Or you get to really decide. And if you decide, you know what, freedom to me is working really, really hard now and putting the hours so that I can have this later, then great. It's so different to every single person. And you're right, like there's so many ways that you can shortcut the process. You can't shortcut it completely, but there are a lot of ways by just learning from people that have made all the mistakes.
Yeah, being in community, doing the inner work, having an aligned strategy, getting mentorship, taking personal responsibility, all those things are game changers. And, I think one of the things actually I was curious to ask you was just with your success, did you ever have a fear of success, or did you ever have guilt for the success that you had?
No.
Yeah. I love that.
I never feared it and I never felt guilty about it. I think the reason I didn't feel guilty about it is I grew up in such a turbulent home and I felt like my mum stayed in a really violent situation because she had no freedom. Okay. She didn't have resources to be able to make those decisions. She didn't even know certain things existed. And I believe from such a young age that if she'd had more freedom of finance and, a few other things, she wouldn't have stayed in that situation and we wouldn't have gone through what we went through as children. And I made the commitment to myself that I'm going to give myself the choice. I'm going to give myself the freedom to choose what situation I'm going to be in. And I've never felt guilty about that. Yeah. And I am so proud of the life I live. And I'm so proud of the life I've been able to give my family. And I just don't feel guilty about it. I'm like, yeah, more of this. I want to show women what's possible because I wish we'd known back then what was possible, because maybe we wouldn't have went through some of the things we went through.
That's beautiful. I really get that that's part of your deeper mission to support women because of your childhood and what you experienced with your mom and growing up and wanting that for her and wanting to change that for Noemi, for your family. That was really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it. That's the choice to just know that we have options. I think that's the mindset of choice, to say it's not even, I can't. It's like I choose not to, or I choose to, because sometimes we can't even see the choices. But when we start to open our mind, we're like, okay. And then our life starts to change. It's first awareness, right? And so when we see that we have options and start making changes for ourselves, and it gives other people permission to see that they can also do the same.
Yeah, if you're in a position where you can choose something different, you're winning. You really are.
Well, that's a beautiful. How do you feel based on where you are in your life right now and your relationship with your mom and seeing how far you've come? I'm sure that's got to be such a blessing.
Yeah, it's so interesting to like really look back and just, you know, I don't know that I would want to relive my childhood, but I look back and I just think, well, I'm really proud of where I've gotten to. I'm proud of the healing work that me and my mum have done in our relationship, and becoming a mother too just gave me a whole different level of understanding of some of the choices that were made that I just didn't understand before. I think it just cracked me open on a whole different level, and being able to see certain situations in different ways has been amazing. But yeah, I feel really proud, and I love to be open about what my childhood was like and what I came from, because I also, when I think back to that little girl, you know, I wasn't hearing other people talk about anything going on behind closed doors. Back then, and especially where I grew up, everything was hidden and everything was private.
Yeah.
And I didn't have awareness that there was a different way until I started to hit my teen years. Really, I didn't have that awareness. And I just think it's really important to be open about that kind of stuff, so that if there is someone else listening, maybe they get a glimmer of what else could be possible, a different reality. And, you know, you don't need to come from a certain background to create a different version of reality for yourself.
Yeah. Will you share with us just a highlight or just an understanding so that people have a reference point
of my childhood? Yeah, there was a lot of domestic violence, a lot of alcohol abuse. It was, you know, a lot of mental health issues. It was just very, very challenging. I witnessed so many things, including my mum's suicide attempts that, thank goodness, never worked. But just a lot of that, like a lot of very, very serious domestic violence, a lot of police intervention, and it was just very, very challenging. I moved out when I was 13.
I remember you telling me that. And also like your resourcefulness and your ability to start taking care of yourself and growing up really young, you know, you're the oldest, right?
I'm the oldest of 8.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like in some ways that shaped you and your character and who you are today. And
totally. And it's like I said, I don't know that I would want to relive it, but at the same time, I don't know that I would be who I am without it.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be who I am. I'm so happy to be this strong and this resourceful and this empathetic. You know, I think I understand things in a very visceral way that a lot of people go through or have gone through. And I'm so grateful to have that now that I'm
on the
not
other
going
side
through it.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for that. And it's really nice to be able to look back on my childhood and see it that way.
Yeah.
Versus looking back and seeing it from like a resentful place.
And to me, that's a testament to the work that you've done, to be able to see it from that perspective. Because I think sometimes part of our healing journey is to be upset and angry and whatever our human emotions are. And then we keep going and we get to that other place. But I also hear the resiliency that you've developed, and that's also probably supported your success as an entrepreneur. What would you say were some of the cornerstones that helped you get from where you were to where you are?
Resourcefulness. You know, there's just no substitute for it. You have to be willing to figure it out, because people aren't just gonna, you know, answers aren't just gonna present itself. People aren't just gonna make it like, you have to be resourceful and figure it out. And I always had that mindset. And it really did take a long time for me to see any kind of success. You know, my first business, I struggled so hard with it. And it was like, I didn't understand how people were making sales and how people were able to replace their salary with their business. It didn't make sense to me, and I was still committed to figuring it out. So I would say resourcefulness for sure. Personal responsibility. Like I just take responsibility for my own success, and I don't blame anybody else. You know, I'm never the person that joins a program and blames someone for not delivering what they say. I get something out of everything that I do.
That's right.
And I take full responsibility for that. Being committed to doing my own work at every single level of success has its own brand new set of challenges. And I'm like constantly, we were just talking about in courses we're both enrolling in before this podcast. It never stops.
It's also the best thing to invest in, your time, energy, money, because our lives get better the more we dive into it. So I think you and I we love resourcefulness, personal responsibility, but also proactively doing the work, because it's all in there. And it's like life and our businesses are a mirror. And so as we proactively do the work to wake up to what else is true beyond our conditioning, it shows up in our relationships, at business and health and our family. So why not? Like, I never want that goal to end. I always want to be investing time and energy into bettering my life, learning, growing, evolving. And I think, I want to do a course with you. We should do something fun together.
Oh my God, I would love that. Yeah, I love that so much. And every season's different, right? Like, not every single season's, how do I invest in a course to make more sales? What about, how do I invest in something that's going to teach me how to be more present? Or there's always something that we get to learn. There's always, it can feel even better. It can always feel better and get better. And I'm so available for that. And that's the growth path that I'm committed to. And growth doesn't always have to be challenges, and often it is, but it can also be really fun, and knowing what's coming on the other side of something. It often is so much better than you can imagine. So having that mindset really, really helps. And just continuing to invest. Being consistent, continuing to invest in yourself, continuing to do the work.
Yeah. And I think there's a shadow and light. Like, we want to do the shadow work, the healing work, and there's a place where we really immerse ourselves in it, but we also don't want to live there. So then there's balancing it with play and upper limits and manifestation and, like, how could it get better? Not from this place of, because I think the shadow of psychotherapy is always healing the past. And I think the shadow of coaching is always looking for the future. So presence as the foundation, and really coming from a place of wholeness and gratitude, but being honest with what phase we're in our journey. And from this, there's a point where it really does click, where it's like, okay, in my experience, it's like, I feel like I've done a lot of my work. Now I just want to give back. Now it's just about service. And like, ironically, that actually is super selfish. It feels so good to be used in that way, to know that you're making a difference. And, I also think you hear a lot of the behind the scenes of women and the real truth of what they're going through. I'm curious, is there anything that surprises you about their journey in entrepreneurship specifically?
I'm still so surprised by so many women that are absolutely crushing it, that doubt themselves so much.
Yeah.
So surprising to me, because I have this, I'll get the chance to work with someone and I'll have this idea that they must be so confident because they're crushing it. And I'll sit down with them and they're still doubting themselves, this far in. And I think there's this myth that it goes away at a certain point. Yeah. If you hit that milestone, all of that goes away. And I don't think it does. And I also think there's a real beauty to keeping some of that.
Yeah.
That the humbleness when you're around people, and that excitement to always, like, to be in the rooms, some of the rooms that I could never imagine being in, I'm in on a regular basis, and it's never lost on me. And I think that's really beautiful. And you don't want to be in from a place of imposter syndrome, but you can transmute that into how amazing is this, like a pinch me moment. So I'm definitely surprised when I work with women that still have a lot of that self-doubt.
I want to plug that, because I remember hearing Oprah talk about, Beyonce did an interview with Oprah, and afterwards Beyonce was like, was that okay? And just to hear Beyonce saying that, and so there's like a balance of not being arrogant, but also, wanting to do our best. I think there's a sweet spot with that.
Yeah.
And kind of waking up to the narrative of the doubtful voice, so that we can see it's just a story in the moment. But yeah, that people really do continue to doubt, no matter what the level of success is. That's great.
Yeah. And then another thing too, especially with women that have experienced a certain level of success, like I might see this in my mastermind, is I went through a similar journey myself. When you get into business, you're often a very different person to who you are 5-10 years later. And if you're not really honest with yourself throughout the process of what's feeling good, or what you might have outgrown, or what's out of alignment, you can end up having a business that looks amazing on the outside and really unfulfilling on the inside. Like you said, when you got to a place that you really want to give back. Sometimes you get to that place and you're like, I'm not actually giving back in the way I would want to be, or my business has gotten so big, I'm not connecting on the same way that I want to be. So just having candor with yourself along the journey to consistently ask yourself, am I on the path that feels good to me? And be okay with pivoting and changing if that's not the truth, because like Simon Sinek calls it, we're playing an infinite game. You know, not all of us are in business to just have an exit after 5 years and move on to something else. We're playing an infinite game. And if you come at it with that mindset, you'll constantly ask yourself, would I be happy doing this in 10 years?
Yeah.
Is this really fulfilling me?
Yeah.
And you let go of that sunk cost fallacy that, well, I've spent 5 years doing this, that I need to keep going. Well, no, what if we let go of that fallacy and we maybe pivot a little bit so it does feel good, and we could probably double down on even more of what's working. And so that always surprises me, because I always see the outside, the highlight reel. And when I get to see the inside, I'm like, they're just the same as me.
We're all the same.
Yeah. Always the same problem.
Yeah. And it keeps coming back to just being honest with ourselves and speaking that truth and trusting and getting resourceful and giving ourselves permission, which is a big part of what I'm hearing you say, which is so beautiful.
Not much bad can happen if you're really honest with yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
And then honest with others from that place.
Yeah. I think that's the harder part for most.
Yeah. But nothing much bad can happen. And I have faced some big fears around that, losing relationships that meant the world to me. And it's still better than not being authentic.
That's right.
And not being honest.
That's right.
Because do you really want that relationship if it's built from a place that isn't honest and authentic? Deep down, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And it goes for relationships, but so many other things in your life.
100%.
Nothing that bad can happen from being really, really honest.
Yeah. Just in closing, what would you have wished you had known sooner on your entrepreneurial journey?
That was a good one.
Like for me, I'm like, it works out. It's okay. Just like to settle that anxious part of me that was really excited to succeed, and sometimes, would see other people that were further along and really doubt that I could do it. I think unconsciously that part that doubts or compares is trying to motivate me to be further ahead. And in my 20s, it was really loud. And I wish somebody had told me 20s, it's probably going to happen until you find your way. And then 30s was really, building and like coming into myself, but it doesn't matter what age. Like, I think when I was young, I knew it was all going to be okay. And it's actually all okay on a soul level anyway, in the moment, beyond the narrative I'm telling myself in the moment. But to let my essence meet my ego, to relax it, to say, it's okay to worry. It's okay to want to be further. And I got you. And you're good right now. And you don't have to be any different than the way you are. I think those types of tools would have helped me. I probably still would have played out the same thing.
Totally.
But yeah, what would you have loved to know?
Oh, I love that so much, what you said. I think what I would have loved to know is that you don't hit a certain point or milestone in your business where it's just smooth sailing after that. I think that was such a misconception
The
that
good
I
and
had.
the bad.
Yeah. I thought, okay, when I get to this, it'll be easy. When I hit that goal, it'll be different. And what I've been practicing in business in the last few years really is emotional neutrality around a lot of things, where the good is good and the bad is bad, but I don't let the good be too good and I don't let the bad be too bad. I really try to stay, maybe it's like quite stoic in business. I don't like to make really emotional decisions. I don't like to get caught up in too much of good or too much of bad. I really just like to let things unfold. And I like, in the UK, we have this phrase, water off a duck's back. Just things come and go.
Yeah.
And your capacity to hold things will expand and things will get easier and easier because of the mindset you'll approach it with, the experience you'll approach it with, not because you hit a milestone in your business.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And if I'd known that earlier, I probably would have approached certain things earlier, certain times in your business when you're early on, you think one mistake's the end of the world. It's the end of your business. And you might think when you get to a certain revenue level, that goes away. But ultimately, it's the same problem, but you've got a bigger business that you might lose.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to practice some kind of neutrality around that and not buy into all of that so much and not let it ruin your entire day just because something goes wrong.
Completely.
Water off a duck's back and keep going.
Yeah. And for me, learning the tools to navigate entrepreneurship helps me do that authentically. And also just hearing from other friends where I was like, that's a Tuesday. It's like, okay, I can hold that more. I remember I was doing a webinar a week for 2017. I pretty much did 52 webinars. Maybe sometimes I did 2. It was a holiday. I would batch it. And I was in Hawaii on vacation. This meant everything. I just brought my business online the first year. And I put however much into ads, and I had thousands of people on, and I sold this webinar, and you had to fast action buy while you were on the webinar. And I don't know how much it made, but I had just had a new merchant count company that I was working with. They refunded everyone. And so I went from whatever, I was in the red, and I was like, what? And that started teaching me about resilience and flexibility. And so everything you're sharing, I'm like, oh yeah, that may not be ideal, but I know in my resourcefulness, I did figure it out. But there's like a maturity, I think, that happens with experience, age, and the tools.
I think so. And things like that happen all the time still.
Yeah.
Nothing works all the time as it's supposed to, no matter how many team members you've got. And I think as a leader, when you can approach something like that, you become a really safe space for your team. And you can it's like that masculine structure you can bring to the team, that they feel, okay, things are good. It looks like everything's burning, but she's not panicked, so it must be okay. Yeah. And you can remind them, I've seen this before. Yeah. This happens. This is normal. This is part of it. Just like that big win we had last week was part of it. This is part of it. And we can't have that big win without this. And that is, I think, a experience. And it's something I love to bring to my team, especially if they're maybe newer in this and they haven't seen so much of that. I'm like, oh, that went wrong. Great. It's part of it. We had that big win last week. Things balance out.
Totally. I think that's maturity. And I think that gives them space to make mistakes and not freak out about it and learn from it easier and recover.
Totally.
That's beautiful. I love you so much. I know my audience they're going to want to stay connected. Where do they find you? How do they stay connected?
Bossbabe.com is the best place. You can join our membership. It's amazing.
Yes, it is.
And then on Instagram @I'm Natalie, @bossbabe.inc, and the Boss Babe podcast.
I love you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my world.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a difference. And if you're finding value in this podcast, a cost-free way to support us is by leaving an up to 5-star review. It does mean the world to us. And as a thank you gift, we're going to send you one of the most powerful tools that you will ever discover. You're going to get behind the scenes access showing you how to live into your full potential without letting fear hold you back from stepping into your dreams. Just head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and leave a review now. You can take a screenshot before hitting submit and then go to alyssanobriga.com/podcast to upload it. And make sure to have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much magic I can't wait to share with you. And you can find all this information in the show notes below. But lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello. I'm @Alyssa Nobriga. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you.